We are live.
We are live. I think we're all ready to go. So, Louis-Antoine, welcome to NGen's Project Podcast. I'm Jay Myers. Really looking forward to today's discussion with Louis-Antoine Genin-Brien
Yes,
how was that? from,
it's good.
Louis-Antoine, bienvenue. C'est super de vous accueillir ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Really glad to have you with us today to tell us a little bit about Deepsight, your involvement with AR, augmented reality, and some of the great things that you're doing with this technology, and some of the support that we've been able to provide through NGen. So, Louis-Antoine, let's kick things off. Tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with Deepsight, and tell us a little bit about Deepsight itself.
Well, first off, thank you, Jay, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of this podcast today. So a bit about myself. I joined Deepsight as one of the first few employees. I was a longtime friend of the co-founders, Nicholas and Francis. And my role in the business is business development. So I've been responsible for developing channels with training centers, with engineering firms that will benefit Deepsight in generating a lot of customers. And why AR? So that's the question today. Why is Deepsight in the AR field? I'm going to go back and talk a bit about history, because I think the best way to justify why AR is such an important thing today is to look back in history. That's how you learn about the present times. It's by looking back into history. And I'm a big fan of history. And when we look into history, the way information has been communicated, how information was communicated from one person to the other, traditionally was done from, ear to mouth. You would just speak to the others. And about 10,000 years ago, there was a population, a group called the Sumerians. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Sumerians, Jay. Is it
First alphabet?
In French, the Sumerians.
Yeah. First alphabet.
And so these Sumerians, they invented a way of communicating ideas through mud tablets. So they had mud tablets, and they could, write with little wood pieces in the mud tablets to express an idea. And those mud tablets could be shared. And that's how they were able to convey even more information and also make sure that the information wasn't lost. And, the information was shared different ways. And then when the 15th century arrived, then Gutenberg invented the okay, and so information was being shared even more broadly because of that invention. And so things evolved a little bit, and then at the beginning of the 20th century, the television was invented. So the first screen was invented. And then at the beginning of the 21st century, we invented smartphones and tablets. But all of these innovations, from the mud tablet to the tablet today, they all have one thing in common, whether it's paper, they all have the same format. All the information is formatted in a 2D format. And so there are limitations when you're trying to communicate in a 2D format. And for 10,000 years, the humans have been communicating ideas in a 2D format. But what if I could tell you that you could communicate an idea in a 3D format using augmented reality or virtual reality for that matter? And obviously, there are way more possibilities in the ideas you can communicate. And also, because you're communicating in a different format, your ideas can be understood better by the people receiving the information. So that's a bit why Deepsight started working in augmented reality, and especially using 3D in augmented reality. It's to be able to convey more information to people. And we're specifically using that information today and 3D and augmented reality to train workers in the industrial field a bit better. So that puts a bit of context into why augmented reality is important to us today.
So just to explain for us, if you would, Louis-Antoine, what's the difference between AR and VR, and how are both of these technologies being used today?
That's a good question. And I think it's important for people that are not familiar with the technology to understand, because even though those technologies share a similar name, they're used for completely different use cases. So virtual reality is much more known by the broad public because there are more applications today, specifically in entertainment. So virtual reality is consumed normally through a headset that you're going to be wearing, and that is going to be cutting you off completely from the real world. So in virtual reality, you're completely immersed in a virtual representation of either a you know whatever you want, basically, because it's virtual. In augmented reality, the information will be added to this physical world. So instead of wearing a headset that's going to be cutting you off from everything around you, from your surroundings, you're going to be wearing glasses that will allow you to see your surroundings, but will be adding, using augmented reality, will be adding digital content to your surroundings to augment these surroundings. And so what we do at Deepsight is only augmented reality. And, when virtual reality came in about 10 years ago, it had a lot of promises, but, for example, I'm not too keen on virtual reality because it gives me nausea, and it's not, I don't find it's the best way of communicating ideas. Also, you're cutting off people from the real world. So I find that the best place to interact is still the real world. I might, in my generation, I might be someone special for saying that, but I still find that the best place to communicate is the real world. And so I truly believe that the future doesn't necessarily lie in virtual reality, at least for broad applications. Virtual reality is great for entertainment, but when we're talking about broad applications of mixed reality, so mixed reality is like the general, that it's like the group that encompasses AR and VR. And when we talk about broad applications of mixed reality, I would lean towards AR, augmented reality, way more than virtual reality. And so today, virtual augmented reality is you can deploy AR experiences, augmented reality experiences, on a headset like the HoloLens 2 that is quite big. But eventually, there will be glasses that will be available to the general public, and people will be able to go. People will have all these glasses, even potentially lens in their eye, that will be able to provide information as they're going on with their daily activities, and we're not too far from that.
Well, it's I mean, here's the economist in me talking about technology and just saying that's really neat. Uh, but going back to you're a fan of history, I know, and going back to the history of communication. So now we're working in an entirely new medium. AR is changing the way not only people communicate, but potentially the way people think. And let's take a look at some of those use cases in a minute. But how do you see AR really changing the nature of communication, and just generally maybe say a few things about the how it's changed, how the medium itself is the message, I guess, is what I'm getting at. How is this medium really revolutionizing the way that we understand things, the way that we communicate? And then let's talk about some of the use cases.
Well, we often say an image is worth 1,000 words. And so using 3D is worth X amount of images. Basically, the way I see it is when you communicate with somebody in a virtual setting, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, you'll see people that get into disagreements very quickly. Because when you communicate online or when you communicate through text, there's this interpretation that needs to be done by the reader. And interpretation leads to, when it comes to, I can only talk about technical instructions because that's what we do in augmented reality. But when you compare a textual instruction for a complex task with a 3D instruction for a complex task, the added value of augmented reality is really into removing that interpretation. And, we're more and more in a global economy where You can have a company established in Canada with factories all over the world. And so workers are increasingly communicating with other workers that might not share the same mother tongue. So the idea of giving the tools to people to communicate visually and universally using 3D content instead of text and languages, I find is very powerful. And that's where the most added value AR can bring.
So a lot more precision, a lot more agreement on what the communication is about. So, tell us about some of the use cases then, and particularly what Deepsight's been focusing on.
So what we found at Deepsight when we first started using AR is we first did a project through NGen with a company called Avior, and Avior had an issue where most of their training was done through job shadowing on the floor. But the problem is, and you will agree with that, I'm sure, there is a shortage of labor right now, and that shortage of labor is mostly caused by the fact that experienced workers are retiring. Okay. And so if most of the job shadowing is done with experienced workers on the floor, well, you can expect that it's very difficult for companies to do that job shadowing. So training that should take a few weeks can sometimes take a full year. So because you're not able to release or to liberate your experts to do the job shadowing. So when we first started working with Avior, we really focused our energy on developing a solution that would enable companies to replicate this expert guidance, but virtually through 3D animations. So instead of having an expert worker that is going to be spending all of his time showing every step of a complex procedure to another worker, we just put all of our eggs in the AR basket and told ourselves, how can we replicate all of these expert manipulations in the field of view of the worker as he is working, and also making sure that the content that will be displayed in the working space will be anchored with precision in this space, because we really want to replicate expert guidance. And that's how we do it at Deepsight. We've developed the tools for companies to create their own AR experiences to replicate expert guidance, whether it's in an assembly shop for aerospace parts, whether it's in an automated production line and you need to do changeovers. The idea is that more and more companies are depending on their experts, whether it's for training or for certain operations, and we want to remove that dependency on expert knowledge on the factory floor.
That's technology. So the demographic challenges are really very important, and as you say, not only shortages of skills that every company is facing today, but also some of the challenges in handing down knowledge from workers who have been there for ages and ages, who are nearing retirement, who have the wisdom to be able to do things that now you can communicate can communicate directly in real time to people. And Avior is in the aerospace sector, so these are complex tasks. They're not just run of the mill repetitive tasks that people are learning.
Yes, they are very complex tasks, and one of the because there's not a lot of repetitiveness in the tasks that workers are doing on the floor. Some procedures can last 100 hours. The challenge was content creation. So how are you going to create a work instruction in 3D if that work instruction is only going to be viewed a few times on the floor? So there needs to be some sort of balance between content creation and content visualization. There needs to be much more time visualizing content than there was time creating the content. And that's where Deepsight comes in. So using the support of NGen and the brains of our partners and colleagues here, we've developed a tool a bit like PowerPoint, where you can create your 3D work instructions without any programming knowledge. And you can also leverage the content that you already have. So, a parts manufacturer like Avior has already CAD models for all the parts they're manufacturing. they already have work instructions in their ERP for these parts. And so at Deepsight, we're just leveraging this content that they already have using our platform to create those 3D instruction guides. And so the idea of creating a guide is creating a 3D instruction guide in Deepsight is even more fast than if you were to create a textual guide, traditional guide. And that, I think that's where the magic really is, because 3D instruction guides, fine, but then creating those guides needs to be quick, and the adoption of those guides needs to be quick for companies to see a benefit, because a lot of companies were burnt by the VR craze about 10 years ago. A lot of companies thought that the VR would save everything. They could do all the training in a class and they wouldn't have to disrupt operations for training. But then there wasn't really much training done in those classes. But with augmented reality, you're learning on the job, doing the tasks that you're actually going to be doing as an expert in the future. And the guides that our clients create are created very fast and are being deployed very quickly also.
So you've really developed a tech solution, but it's not technology. It's not a tech problem that you're solving. It's a real business problem here, which is something I think could be replicated in any sector of manufacturing or any industry.
100%. I mean, we work with food companies, we work with pharmaceutical companies in the mining sector. In the end, all of these sectors have one thing in common, which is manual tasks and people to train. And the people in these sectors have less and less qualifications, because companies have to hire less and less qualified people because there's just nobody to hire. I'm not sure for the rest of Canada, but I know that in Quebec, the ratio of immigrant workers in a factory went from 10% to 20% this year. So there's going to be more and more challenges with language barriers. So the idea to have a tool that's going to automate your training, but also automate your training in a universal way of communicating, because we're showing all the procedures with 3D animations in the field of view of the worker, I think is revolutionary. And as you said, our customers are not looking for AR. Our customers are looking for a way to train their workers faster and to make sure they make less mistakes and that they are less prone to making accidents. And when we talk to companies, they don't look for AR. Obviously, it's the way we solve their problem. It's with AR, but they don't look for that. So there's a lot of work for us to educate our customers on the best way to solve their problems, because most of them don't even know that our technology exists, and we're competing against work instructions on tablets. That's our competitor. So yeah.
And it really goes to the point too that jobs are changing. I mean, they are becoming more complex, and the skills requirements are going to be higher here. And this is very disruptive for many companies that would otherwise be looking for colleges or universities to provide the technical training that would be required to complete jobs here, but where those programs are fairly general and not perhaps as specific as required by modern manufacturers.
Exactly. I mean, each production line is different, right? And each machine, even if you do a training program on electrical mechanics, for example, well, you won't be trained for the specific machine you're going to be using at your workplace. So the burden of having to train workers always lies on the companies. It will never be institutions. Yes, you can develop certain competencies in a training center. Obviously, you can develop some certain reflexes in a training center, mostly, for safety and security. But how to operate a machine, how to reconfigure a production line for a changeover, for example, you need to do it, physically to know how to do it. You won't be able to learn this beforehand. So for companies, they can't rely on, if you have a translating business, if you translate, well, obviously you can hire people from university and you're going to be good. But if you operate machines and it's your reality is only your own. It's not very common that companies share the same machines from a company to the other. Um, so the burden always lies on the company, and that's why we give them the tools to make it as easy as possible.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Deepsight's really at the cutting edge of the technology or the solution here in training, and Aviar has been a great partner in working with you to develop that the work packages or the training packages for their applications. But tell us a little bit about the actual project, and what were some of the challenges that you and Aviar found as you were implementing the project. How did it go?
It went very well. It made us progress a lot, and it helped us also shape the product we wanted, because we're experts of augmented reality. We're passionate about augmented reality, but when we first started Deepsight, we weren't passionate about industrial training. And as this project went along with Aviar, it became our passion. Our passion is no longer AR; it's training workers on the factory floor. And one of the biggest challenges we had with Aviar was precision of content. So when we say that, we're replicating expert guidance in a workstation, well, the 3D animations need to be exactly positioned in the space where the expert would have shown the manipulation to be done. So with Aviar, we were able to develop an anchoring solution where in our studio you're able to position the animations. So in our studio, in our creation tool, authoring tool, you're able to position the different animations in the space, and when the worker comes using the smart glasses to view the animations using QR codes, all of the content is anchored in the space. And that was a groundbreaking feature, because using our partnership with NGen and Aviar, we were able to beat solutions like Microsoft's and Vuforia that have billions of dollars behind them. And we were able to bring even more precision into augmented reality content using their expertise and our expertise. And even moving forward, I mean, Aviar, they're using a lot of lasers that are on the ceiling for composite assemblies, for example, where you require a lot of precision in the guidance. And the idea, in the near future, is to be able to, with precision of content, to be able to beat those lasers. So instead of using lasers that you would install on your ceiling that would show you to the half a millimeter precision where to position your sheet of carbon composite, you would put the glasses and it would show you exactly where to put that sheet. And so we're not only going to be beating work instruction solutions, but we're also going to be beating highly precise guidance solutions like lasers. And I think that's something we could have never done without Aviar.
Well, that is really super. And the other thing that occurs to me is how important this solution is for companies that are focusing on the value, on what needs to get done to deliver value for customers, which is to do the job, but then taking out all of the non-value adding activities that go along with it, including replication of training and problems in not having that precision, not being able to guarantee the quality. So all of this is part of the solution, I think, that Deepsight's offering.
Exactly. I mean, our solution is about in-operation training. So you don't need to have a two phases process where you train the worker and then that worker becomes productive for the company. No, using the Deepsight solution, the worker is instantly productive to the company. And not only that, but our solution now includes a productivity analysis tool where when workers are consulting the content in the field, we're tracking how much time they spend on each step for the whole procedure. We're comparing these times between workers to generate continuous improvement and learning opportunities for these workers. We ask workers to take photos and videos as they're completing steps. So for more critical procedures, for example, we work with petrol gas companies where if they open the wrong valve, it could lead to an explosion. So for traceability and compliance, we ask workers to take a photo which valve they've opened while consulting their instruction guide. And so for traceability and compliance, there's a lot of industries where you literally had to have an expert looking at another expert worker working to make sure that that worker working was compliant. But now you're removing the need to have somebody doing nothing, just looking at somebody else, and that's it has nothing to do with AR. We're just leveraging the glasses, but it's our 3D instruction guides are basically the excuse for us to be using the smart glasses. And those smart glasses have a bunch of sensors, cameras that we can leverage to generate even more data for companies and generate even more benefits for companies. So the AR is just a medium to generate a bunch of benefits. And I think that's what's great with our solution today.
So that all of that feedback to the company in terms of data for quality improvement, for eliminating other types of waste in the process, as you say, compliance and everything else is that sounds like a much more powerful tool than just simply a training tool here.
Exactly, because a training tool, it's difficult to calculate return on investment on specifically a training tool because it's a long-term thing. Our solution was originally a training tool. It shifted to a work instruction tool. So using a work instruction tool, you're able to calculate return on investment a bit easier because you can tell, oh well, that worker took X amount of time doing X procedure. Now that worker takes less time, makes less mistake. Even though that worker is not in training, sometimes these workers need to reskill themselves. They need to refresh their memories doing certain procedures. And that way we were able to calculate a good return on investment. But, on top of that, being able to gather data that's going to be able to calculate a return on investment for the companies to say, well, you've saved X on this procedure, you've saved X on this procedure. And one of the few things that we can do with the smart glasses is on the smart glasses, there's a gyroscope. And so we're even able to know where the worker is walking in a procedure. And eventually what we would like to do is to develop like an AI model that will enable us to generate automated optimization opportunities. So for certain procedures. And so, like I said, the 3D guides, it's just a medium for somebody to wear the glasses. And once they wear the glasses, we're able to gather so much data, then the benefits for the company are pretty much endless.
So of course, you are still going to depend on employees with a certain amount of skill level here, and this will augment their capability to do the task in a much better way. And to provide that feedback to the companies. But is there, to what degree does this solution, I don't want to say replace the sort of the standards, the competencies, the certifications that are required in manufacturing, but it seems to me that you can communicate in a much better way through these real-time work instructions, a capability that employees may not actually have as a result of the certifications that they've been able to gather. And this is a significant improvement on even the ability to certify workers. But what's that mix? To what extent does this replace or coincide with certifications that are perhaps that are required today in the trades or in engineering departments? How does this kind of disrupt that flow?
The idea is not to completely replace expert trainers on the floor, but mostly to make sure that these expert trainers spend as much time as possible with people that need it the most. Because as I said, you're still going to be hiring people that are qualified. They've went to school, but they just need to have a refresher on your specific machine or on your specific assembly. they don't need the full on training on the floor. But some other workers, specifically in the food and beverage industry, where some people don't even have high school degrees. They have very very limited competencies. The idea of putting a glasses on will show you very simple tasks, but it's still tasks that needed to be shown by an expert. So I the idea, as I said, it's not to completely remove those experts, but to make sure they focus on as much value generating task for the company. And even though we started in the aerospace sector, uh, you know, as I said, we have a solution that helps you create content fast, but it's still a barrier to entry for some companies. And so we found a niche, but not a niche, but actually a better use case for our solution, more in automated production lines, where workers are typically less qualified and need to be refreshed more often. And so the content creation is also faster in an automated production line, because instead of using CAD models and animating CAD models, you're going to be using 3D scans of your machines, and then you're going to be contextualizing instructions around those 3D scans. And so content creation for these types of use cases is even faster. So moving forward, it's mostly in these automated production lines where we're going to be generating a lot of value. And that's where workers typically are much less qualified. Not sure
Well,
if this
that's
answers the question.
yeah, no, that sounds really, really good. And I'm thinking, so if I'm a company and I would really, thinking of maybe this might work well for me, uh, what would I need to do to prepare to implement a solution like this?
That's a good question. So obviously it's a new tool. So we need to train people on using the tool. So when we start working with a company, these companies go through an implementation process that lasts in total about 7 to 8 months. The first 5 to 8 weeks of that implementation process is a training phase where we train champions internally to create content and to view content on the Deepsight application. And during that phase, we also train people on what inputs they need to create content in the platform. So as I mentioned, we use 3D scan, we use CAD models. So depending on the reality of the company, depending on the procedures that are more critical to them, we're going to educate them on the best inputs to gather. It's a bit as if you're creating a PowerPoint. It's imagine creating a PowerPoint without pictures. There's no point. So obviously the company needs to gather those inputs first, those pictures first, before starting to create on the Deepsight platform. And then how we work, it's fairly simple. On the HoloLens, on the glasses, you have a camera. So most of the time, the people that create content in the Deepsight platform, they don't know all of the procedures on the floor. So what we do is we ask experts on the floor to film themselves in a POV type of camera. So we see all of what the worker is doing. The videos are then sent to the champion creating content in the Deepsight platform, and using the inputs that we have identified, the champion would be able to create all of those work procedures using the video and the 3D scans or CAD model that we've imported into the platform. And so using that workflow, I mean, we haven't had any problem implementing at large companies like ABB, Galderma, Anico Eagle. We're even in discussion with Airbus right now for a project very soon. So it's there's not much to prepare on the company side, but we're still a work instruction tool. So if a company wants to benefit as much as possible from that tool, they need to create a lot of content. So it's still, there's still sometimes a challenge there to have somebody create a lot of content during that 7 to 8 month implementation. And that's why we have the 5 to 8 week training and then about 6 months of dedicated support from an account manager to make sure that there is as much content created as soon as possible.
You could even do a platform to train people how to use the platform.
Well, we actually work with integrators. So in Quebec, we are discussing a partnership with one of the biggest LMS provider in the province. We also work with engineering firms that have an expertise in different fields. So we already have a partnership with an engineering firm in the mining sector And so the idea is that when they're going to be implementing a client to the Deepsight platform, these integrators will take on the creation of content. And so they will create a lot of procedures from the get-go. And so for us, that's the best model because we have customers that have a lot of content. And if customers have more content, well, they will be using the solution more. And if they use the solution more, then they're going to be buying more Deepsight licenses. And so it's a win-win for everybody. Our integrators make a lot of service fees, and we're happy selling our licenses to a broad public.
So your customers could be manufacturers or industry users of the technology, but they could also be the technology vendors themselves in being able to download instructions about, actually lasting instructions about how best to use the technology that they're putting in place, the automation systems, for instance.
Exactly. I mean, we want to work with OEMs, like ABB, for example. They're one of the biggest providers of automation robots in the world. What would be a dream of mine is for ABB to say, well, right from now on, we don't deliver paper guides with our robots. We just put a QR code on the robot and we deliver our robots with a smart glasses. And if you want to train yourself on the robot, you just scan, and all the work procedures associated with that robot, whether it's maintenance, repair, and so on, will be directly tied to the product. And that would be great. And also we're adding remote assistance capabilities. So if you have a customer that's having issues using one of your products, they could, in one button, request help from the OEM for assistance. So there are definitely many use cases. And, right now we're in discussion with a hotel that wants to train people just doing the maintenance of the rooms. So what they're thinking about doing is putting a QR code in every room. And when a worker comes in the room using the glasses, they scan the QR code and there's a sequence that tell them what to clean. And there's a checklist to say if you've done everything. So the possibilities are endless. It's not only the industrial sector. If you have people to train in a physical setting, augmented reality is the best way to communicate the information you want to communicate.
No, that's right. I was going to say that we'll make sure that we send this podcast to ABB. But
they know.
For a lot of other of our members as well. But you've got a lot of recognition. New award from CREAC. Recognition for the solution, but also for Deepsight.
Yes, so the CREAC is the Consortium for Research and Innovation in Aerospace in Quebec. And so we got some recognition from them. And also, I'm not sure if you know the Bourse Gilles Demers, which is also another prize in the aerospace sector. So, having a solution like ours that is able to replicate expert guidance is vital to any industry, but specifically in the aerospace sector, because the labor shortage is affecting them even more than other sectors because the personnel is way more qualified. And so having a solution like ours that make aerospace companies more resilient, specifically right now, well, a bit less now, but, in COVID times, things slowed down a little bit in the aerospace sector. And our solution made the aerospace companies more resilient to these changes. And so I think that's why we were recognized. But, right now we're starting to be recognized in other sectors than aerospace. And I think that's where I see a lot of, I'm happy that we got this recognition for sure. But I want Deepsight to be recognized in other sectors as well. And that's where I take a lot of pride.
Well, it helps. And look, we'd be more than happy to help you to connect to some of those other sectors as well. I think we've covered a lot in terms of where the future lies for Deepsight. But Louis-Antoine, tell me, for a company that invests in this platform, in the solution, what's the time for payback? What are you looking at in terms of the savings and how long it'll take to recoup the cost?
It's a good question. And, I told you that our use cases vary from every customer. I mean, they all have different use cases, different realities. But I can give you an example of Galderma, which is a pharmaceutical company. They manufacture creams. Cetaphil, maybe it's a cream, they were part of the Nestle group at one point. Then their production is very automated, meaning that they run 24/7 on weekends as well. And because of that, on weekends and on night shifts, the workers were way less qualified, meaning that they had a lot of production downtimes on these shifts. And the reason for that was that sometimes they had to do changeover procedures on a Saturday night. But the worker that's been there for a few weeks doesn't know how to do the changeover procedure on the machine. So with Galderma, for example, their production stoppages resulted in about $70,000 of losses every month. And using the Deepsight solution, we were able to bring that down to about half of what it was. So workers were able to complete a changeover procedure by just simply putting the smart glasses on and following the instruction guide. And so we were able to get about $400,000 in return on investment for the first year alone with that client. But obviously, it changes from a customer to the other. In the aerospace sector, one mistake can lead to hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost revenue. So just having a solution that can cut down all of these mistakes to about 100% mistake prevention is a big plus. And in some other industries, it's just the volume of training that is so high. At ABB, for example, they are hiring people all the time. There's so much volume that if you're just able to cut down the involvement of the expert by half, you're saving so much money during the full year. So the idea is that at Deepsight, we're accelerating a time to qualification, time to proficiency by 3 times using our solution compared to traditional methods. And we're reducing errors by 90%. So whichever company is listening now, just make the calculations yourself, and you'll see you'll be generating a lot of benefits pretty quickly.
Well, that's pretty remarkable. And as you say as well, all of this can be fed back for continuous improvement purposes too. So it's not just immediate savings; it's what's learned and can be applied to generate further savings or further value in the future.
Exactly. And for the future of Deepsight, we don't really like buzzwords here. We're trying not to say too much buzzwords, but we're actually starting a project for artificial intelligence. We just received a grant from Scale AI at Venture Lab to develop a artificial intelligence model to predict errors. And so for companies that are going to be starting to work with us, it's going to be very interesting if they start to work with us right now, because we're going to be gathering information on their processes, specifically where the hands are located at a certain step. Because in our solution, we're able to know where your hands are located when you go from one step to the other. And so this data will help us predict errors and mistakes as workers are training, are using the glasses. And so there is an advantage for companies to start working with us right away, because all the data that we gather, we're going to be introducing to our AI model. And that's how they're going to be able to pretty much remove all the potential of errors and accidents on their factory floor.
I think that's not only a great project, it's an ambitious one, but only it's just an example, I think, of Deepsight's vision and where you're going in the future. So, Louis-Antoine, I want to wish you and your colleagues all the best there. I've always said NGen is like a wet T-shirt. We like to stick with you, and
that's a good one.
Anything we can do to help you be successful, we're at your call, and I'd like to follow up with you, because I do have some ideas that maybe we could follow up with, but not bad for a pilot project, Louis-Antoine.
Thank you, Jay. And I would like to finish on that note. I mean, if I have a 93-year-old grandmother, okay, and if I give her my smartphone today, the only thing she's going to remember is the phone term aspect of smartphone. She won't know all the possibilities of that technology, because Nobody took the time to explain it to her. So if ever there are people interested by augmented reality, just know that augmented reality offers much more benefits than just seeing virtual content in your space. You can use it for many different applications. So I invite people to contact me, and I will be happy to explain you all the possibilities that Deepsight can offer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louis-Antoine. Great to have
Thank you
you
very much. Have a good
today on
day.
the podcast. Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.